And that was basically the process. So there was always a human involved currently, checking the data, seeing where we have problems, adjusting parameters in our software, tuning the software, going out again and trying to increase speeds, accelerations, and see how the car behaves.
The world around us is changing faster than ever before. Ideas once only imagined in science fiction are becoming a reality. Throughout the course of our amazing 23-episode season, we'll speak to some of the greatest minds in robotics and artificial intelligence to discuss the groundbreaking work that's fueling it all. I'm your host, Ryan Marine. Join me and my co-host, Paul Mitchell, the president of the Indy Autonomous Challenge, and see why we call this the Inside Track. As many racing engineers would attest, there is no playbook or owner's manual when you're racing on the cutting edge of technology. Much like some of the first Formula One racing teams tearing through the streets of Monaco in the 1950s, today's engineers are building out their racing stacks from the ground up. This includes the code, the computers, and even the car's ability to feel what's happening out on the track. Today on the Inside Track, we get a chance to look at how the autonomous motorsports team from the Technical University of Munich has been writing the manual for the world of autonomous racing. To help explain the process, Simon Hoffmann, the leader of the TUM team, sits down with us to discuss how they became the first ever winners of the Indy Autonomous Challenge, some of the obstacles that they overcame to get their car onto the track, and how the team is able to have real-time conversations about their autonomous car without any driver feedback. It's great to have you on the Inside Track, and I'm just really interested in learning a little bit first about you and how you got into this interesting competition. So at what point in your life was robotics or AI something that became of interest, and then how soon was that something that you were able to channel into the Indy Autonomous Challenge?
So I think in particular this started pretty early, back in school, when I was interested in how technology works, how different robots and robotic applications, advanced driver assistance systems are functioning. I think that's when my passion for these topics raised. And of course, I looked into different studies which I could pursue to develop more or to gain more experience in this field. But I think back then my interest started. Yeah.
Did you always have an interest in automotive, or is that something that you stumbled into a little bit later?
Well, I would say the basic interest was always there, but my main interest was across all of the robotic applications. This came more in university when I got into different lessons touching these applications. I started studying mechanical engineering at first, or mechatronics, which is more like a combination of mechanical, electronics, or informatics. So I wanted to get the whole picture around robots and the way they work. And in this area, we have a pretty good automotive industry here in Munich, and also the university has a lot of lectures in this area. I got interested more into the application of robotics in automotive industry. Yeah.
So let's dive in then to your getting involved with the Indy Autonomous Challenge. At what point during your academic career there at the Technical University of Munich did you become aware of this, and how quickly did you want to sign up when you started to learn about what the IAC was all about?
So I did my master's thesis here at our chair, where I'm currently working. Back then, it was more about control systems of electric vehicles. So actually, a totally different topic. But after I finished my master's thesis, I got the opportunity to start as a research associate, PhD candidate at our chair, working at teleoperated driving, which means basically remotely controlling cars, so real road vehicles remotely controlled, which actually comes into place as soon as automated systems don't work anymore or get to their functional limits, which is more or less a use case for autonomous driving on public roads. Because if you imagine there is no driver inside the vehicle anymore, and the vehicle has to navigate through cities on its own, it might still in the beginning or even in the future get to functional limits. And of course, it would be a shame if it's just standing around there, blocking traffic, delaying its passenger's journey, and then that's where teleoperation comes into place, and that's also the main topic of my PhD I pursued. And then, about 1 year ago, I finished my work on this, and I got the opportunity to join the autonomous racing team at our chair, which I was pretty excited about, because for me it actually was the next step, working on the fallback systems and then also working on the real autonomous vehicle. And I was pretty excited about new challenges and new things to work on. And yes, in the beginning of this year, I started being team lead of our autonomous racing team, and pretty happy right now with our team and how things are going on.
I can imagine so. I mean, the team actually has been a front-running team from the very beginning, going back to the very first event at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And so it sounds like you joined as the team already had established some level of success. So what was it like jumping in kind of midstream on this project that was already fairly well developed, but still needed to further advance as the complexity of the challenge became that much greater?
Well, it feels kind of more relaxing if you're starting and you also already have a basis which works. But still, the challenges increased from race to race. It got more and more complicated, and there's still a long way to go to get to an autonomous racing or to a racing format like real drivers would race, or real race car drivers like we see every week in Formula One, for example. And there's still a lot to do, but I was pretty glad about what I already could find in our software stack. It's very solid software. With this software we managed to win the first Indy Autonomous Challenge. And so a really good basis to start with, but the next challenges are coming.
And it's got to be some pressure too, right? To know that you're jumping into an organization that's already had success, and now they're looking to you to keep that success going.
Yeah, of course. If you're joining a winning team, you only can lose, basically. So if you win, everyone says, yeah, sure.
Of course you did.
Last time. Well, of course, yeah. And if you lose, it's on you. But I think this is not how we work here at the university. For us, we are always looking into what research question we can answer with these challenges. And the challenge is just a fun side part of answering those research questions.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit, because yes, it is an objectively an interesting and cool project to be a part of, but at a certain point you have to justify the continued investment by the university in a project like this. So what are the questions that you continue to ask and the answers that you continue to glean from being involved in this project, and presumably continue to looking into the future as well?
I think first of all, we maybe need to make a step back. So if we're looking into the automotive industry, we already see some cars driving autonomously on roads. We are progressing there, probably not as fast as we initially expected. And for us, the most important point, or let's say in other words, so if we want to see autonomous vehicles driving on car or on public roads really reliable, we need to get up to a reliability of, let's say, 99.999%, and maybe even more. And realizing probably 95%, I think we are pretty close to, but those last percents are I would say, the hardest to achieve. We are always talking about edge cases, for example, so bad weather conditions, driving in on the limits of the car, or things the car has not seen before. So new areas which you see really, you don't see that often on public roads, but if they appear, they are a quite big challenge to the car, and maybe also for a human driver. But if you want to drive reliable and safe on the car, you need to manage those situations. And the Indy Autonomous Challenge for us is opportunity to do research on those edge cases. So we are driving on the limits. We're driving in unstructured with other cars, so there are no lane markings. The other car can use the whole track to defend its race line. And this is basically research on the edge of autonomous driving. And we hope with doing research in those areas, we can limit this last percent or can reduce the last percentage to make autonomous driving safe and reliable on public roads. Yeah.
It sounds like you're trying to plan for the unexpected, but how do you go about doing that when it comes to actually writing the codes, writing the algorithms for this? How do you plan for something that you yourself might not be able to foresee?
Well, on the one hand, we are having a lot of simulations, and we can do a lot of simulations. We can test things that you won't expect on public roads, that you can think about. You even don't want to test it on public roads because it might be dangerous. So we can do this in simulation, and also on the real racetrack. I mean, it's a safe environment. We are not putting any drivers on risk, and so that's maybe one side of the medal. So we can test a lot because it's no danger. We can simulate a lot, and the other part is that we are already driving in those areas that would be unexpected for public road traffic, I would say. So driving with 270 kph through corners at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, that's probably something a real car wouldn't experience. So if you can manage those situations, we expect a road car to also function at maybe road conditions that are wet or snowy at lower speeds, for example.
Stepping away from the competition, one question that I have, and it comes because we've had this conversation with a lot of folks on this show, is of the challenge of taking the autonomy that you see in the Autonomous Challenge, where there are cars that are exclusively driven by AI drivers, and trying to take that to the public roads where you have the extra variable of human drivers interacting with the AI drivers. What kind of challenges do you foresee as we see a greater proliferation of autonomous cars going on in public spaces, interacting with human drivers on a more regular basis in the future?
So this is basically a whole or big research question on itself. So this mixed traffic between autonomous vehicles and real vehicles, or vehicles driven by human drivers, makes it more and more difficult, because if you have a lot or only autonomous vehicles on the road, they could communicate with each other. You might not need any traffic lights and so on. It would make things a lot easier. What makes it difficult is that those autonomous vehicles need to communicate with people on the road, other human drivers, and they can't directly communicate to the human. They need to communicate its intentions via lightings or etc. Traffic lights and so on. So that's a big point. For us, for our racing competition, I would say it does not make a huge difference, because we don't have a vehicle-to-vehicle communication. So for us, it does not make a difference if the other race car is driven by a human or by an AI driver. But in general, of course, there's a huge difference if we have a mixed traffic between human drivers and AI drivers on public roads.
One question that often comes up is what would happen if you put a human driver out with the cars of the Indy Autonomous Challenge? At this stage, how would you view that potential matchup? What do you think the outcome would be, and how close are we to seeing an AI driver being somewhere on par with what a human driver could do?
Currently, saying if we have a professional race car driver, we drove at the historic Formula One racetrack in Monza this year. We are still a bit behind professional race car drivers. We need to get slower and slower to the limit of what we can do, learn the limit, and learn it also online, which is pretty important. I think I would say we're a few seconds away from a real race car driver, but I'm expecting in the future we are getting closer and closer, and maybe sometime we can even beat a real race car driver on the racetrack. Yeah, I think one of the most important things, or the huge things that make a difference, is if you're alone on the track or if you're on the track with other cars. So you need to interact with them. It's like my behavior influences the other's behavior, and so on. So that's also something you need to take into consideration, not just the lap time itself that you're driving in the end. But yeah, from today's point of view, I would say we're not getting to, or we are not at the point where what a human race car driver could do. But I think over the next years we are getting closer and closer.
When that point is reached, will it be like chess, where a computer program is always going to beat a human grandmaster? Do you see that as a potential outcome?
I could imagine, yes. I think for race cars it's more difficult than for chess. A chess computer can take a long time for calculations and stuff. Reacting inside a race car, you have to be quite fast making your decisions, otherwise it's too late. And so that's another challenge. But if a real race car has all the information it needs to make its decisions, an autonomous driver could possibly make better decisions than a real driver. Yeah.
Really interesting. Well, you mentioned the new challenge of the road course, going to Monza, getting a chance to compete there at that historic venue after years spending time perfecting what the car can do on oval tracks, admittedly different ones with Indianapolis, Texas, and Las Vegas. Describe to people who might not understand just how big of a challenge it is to adapt the software that you had put together for the oval tracks to a completely new challenge that was the Monza road course.
So the challenges we had on the ovals back then in the last races were mainly on multi-vehicle driving, so the interaction of the different race cars, making the right decision on when to overtake, seeing the gap to overtaking the right moment, and so on. And what's new this year at the road course racetrack was the longitudinal and lateral dynamics that changed. We had to brake in the right spot in the right moment, accelerate at the right moment, decide in a really narrow gap which velocities we can go through the corners. Either we are too slow and lose too much time, or we are too fast and just spin out of the track. And so this was a major difference to last year's competitions. Another point is we had a lot of trees and overpasses which were over the track, which makes it more difficult for the vehicle to get its own position, so to localize it itself. And when driving at really high speeds, small errors over time increase, and your own position drifts away from your expectation. And that's also a quite big challenge we had this year on the Monza road course.
I'm really interested in how you went about optimizing the different turns of that track. For a human driver, they might watch onboard footage of other human drivers to learn braking points and speeds. They might look at data from other drivers, things like that. And then ultimately they have to go out and experiment for themselves. How did you approach it so that presumably you had some baseline knowledge of what kind of performance might be available, and then you can learn to optimize from there?
So our starting point was basically our simulation. So we had a pretty good simulation of our vehicle, the tire road contact, and this gave us a kind of baseline on what is possible in the different turns. And of course, we started with a few percents below that limit, and tested, watched the data, increased the speed, the velocities through the turns, and that was basically the progress. So the process. So there was always a human involved currently, checking the data, seeing where we have problems, adjusting parameters in our software, tuning the software, going out again and trying to increase speeds, accelerations, and see how the car behaves. So in this process, there were still human involved. But in the future, we are trying to make the vehicle learn this limit by itself. So just send it out and slightly increase the target velocity around the track, and then learn for each curve maybe, or for each turn, how fast the car can go through this turn.
Well, going back to the challenge of transitioning from the oval to the road course, what percentage of your code or your programming would you say carried over, and how much did you have to completely rewrite for the different discipline?
I would say we didn't have to rewrite anything to make the transition. It was more like adjust parameters in a different direction. We had to make some trade-offs, different for the oval or the road course. For example, controller tuning. As I said, you have to brake in the right moment, accelerate at the right time, and that's where we had to make adjustments. But in general, we always try to keep our software generalistic, so to work at different tracks, different conditions, also to work if there's one other car on the track, if there are 4 other cars on the track. We try to keep our software very general to work under all those conditions, so we didn't have to rewrite anything. Of course, we had to create a new simulation model for the Monza track and so on, but the software that was running in the car did not really have to change. We had to use different parameters, but no major adjustments. Yeah.
That's really interesting. There's a final few things for you then. You've spent a lot of time in your research in this field here in recent years. How much of it would you say you expect to see trickling down into what we encounter in our daily lives? What kind of things do you think this is going to make an impact on in our daily lives in the next 5 years or so?
That's a difficult question, but if you're looking back, I think racing was always a driver for inventing new stuff that came into public cars later on. For example, in Formula One, all those aerodynamics, carbon fiber, active suspension and stuff, that was first invented in racing and used in racing, and later on we also saw it on public roads. And that's also our motivation and our idea, that we can develop algorithms for autonomous racing that can be later on used on public roads. For example, we are driving at very high velocities, reacting to other cars at very high velocities, which needs short reaction times. This could be, for example, interesting for autonomous highway evasive maneuvers, for example. if the car perceives an emergency on the highway at high velocities, it needs to take action, for example, autonomously to save the driver inside the car. And maybe that's one of the areas where the research can be applied.
You mentioned earlier that there in Munich, you were very much in the heart of the footprint of the German automotive industry. Do you see the German automotive manufacturers taking interest in what you're doing, the research that you're doing? What can they learn from the experimentation that you and your team have done?
Yes, sure. We are always in contact with different suppliers, manufacturers, and exchanging on the challenges we're currently having. Also working together in some projects on certain solutions. I think research is also, of course, important for the automotive industry here in Munich or in Germany or around the world. A lot of people are doing research in different areas of autonomous driving, from perception to planning, control, localization, and so on. And this all comes back to industry in the future, and that's why they're of course interested in the being an early adapter. For example, what are we currently working on? What are our main challenges we are facing? Yeah. Also, they are interested in the whole Indy Autonomous challenge experience, because as I said in the beginning, from my point of view, the main problems we have to solve in the automotive industry are those last 2 to 5% to have autonomous cars on the roads. And as I mentioned, the Indy Autonomous challenge is driving in one of those edge cases that are missing for the bigger picture.
Well, we'll finish with this then. What has the Indy Autonomous Challenge allowed you to do? How can you use this as a jumping off point to get to where you want to be personally and professionally in the next 5 or 10 years?
Very good question. So the Indy Autonomous Challenge allows students, researchers, to apply their software, their research on a real car and test it in a real environment. I think it's always a huge difference doing or validating your research in simulation compared to driving it in the real car. As I also mentioned, the reality is completely different from simulations most of the time. Or that's one point. People get more and more excited if they are on the racetrack, seeing their car driving on the roads, and it was the same for me. You gain more passion about what you're working on.
Insightful as always, Simon. Thank you so much for joining us on the Inside Track. Thanks for joining us this week on the Inside Track. That was Simon Hoffmann, the team lead at the Autonomous Motorsports team at the Technical University of Munich, giving us an inside look at their autonomous racing cookbook. I'm your host, Ryan Marine. Give us a follow on social media and join us next time to hear from Rue Phillips, the former guitarist for Black Sabbath turned EV pioneer, who's working on many of the new cars hitting the public roads today.